Meet Mehmet Aydin, failed Turkish rapper who scammed almost $139 million from a mobile game before fleeing the country and being extradited back after an almost 3-year-long manhunt. The game in question? Ciftlik Bank, or Farm Bank in English. So what was Ciftlik Bank? And who was Mehmet Aydin? Born in Turkey in 1991 in the small town of Bursa, Mr. Aydin was a high school dropout. He earned money by doing various jobs such as dishwashing. In 2015, he began rapping under the name Ego Man. By 2016, with his dreams of a rap career going nowhere, Mr. Aydin came up with a plan. He saw how profitable and popular the game Farmville was, a mobile game where one could create a virtual farm to plant crops, raise livestock, and complete fun tasks. Farmville's profits came from its in-game cash shop, where players could purchase cosmetic items, as well as speed boosts that let players speed up the pace of their game. Ciftlik Bank was nothing short of a pyramid scheme. Similar to Farmville, allowed the creation of virtual farms. But unlike Farmville, money players spent through the in-game cash shop on virtual chickens, livestock, and items Mr. Aydin claimed be used to invest in real-world livestock, farms, and food production. Players could supposedly earn money on their virtual investments by keeping their virtual animals alive and healthy, as well as by bringing new players into the pyramid scheme. Mobile game. At first, things appeared to be going great. Mr. Aydin publicly purchased 2 large farms near his hometown of Bursa in northern Turkey, which he stocked with cows and other animals, adding to their legitimacy. Deli franchises soon began opening across the country. Anyone could buy one of these delis for the price of $30,000, 10,000 Turkish lira. The products sold inside supposedly came directly from Ciftlik Farms. Ciftlik Bank was on a roll. Mr. Aydin was a celebrity, attending numerous events, such as Games Week Istanbul, a gaming convention which he used to convince more people to join Ciftlik Bank. Along with his inflated ego, Ego Man also maintained his inflated promises, claiming that those who invested 200,000 Turkish lira, 52,000 American dollars, would receive 50,000 Turkish lira, 13,000 per month, as a return. Mr. Aydin also promised to create the largest dairy farm in all of Europe. Housing thousands of livestock, the project would cost roughly 180 mil, providing food and jobs, all while stimulating Turkish agriculture. That's what people truly wanted. Unfortunately for Mr. Aydin, Ciftlik Bank's good times were about to come to an end. November 2017. The Turkish Banking Regulation and Supervision Agency began looking into Ciftlik Bank's financial records after hearing of investors not receiving their money and learning that Ciftlik Bank's main bank account wasn't even located in Turkey, but in Cyprus, in a shell company. Mr. Aydin did this specifically to skirt around Turkish tax law. If these red flags weren't enough, Ciftlik Bank payments to Ciftlik Bank delis ceased the very next month. Mr. Aydin claimed that investors wouldn't be paid back on time due to financial institutions no longer wanting to work with his company. March 2018. The Turkish Ministry of Customs and Trade officially decided that Ciftlik Bank was guilty of committing fraud. The findings of the government investigation were worse than people could have ever suspected. Out of Ciftlik Bank's over 500,000 players, approximately 132,000 were investors who had invested over 1.1 billion Turkish lira, approximately 280 million American dollars, only being paid out around 688 million Turkish lira, approximately 141 million American dollars, leaving 412 million Turkish lira, about 139 million American dollars, completely unaccounted for. Arrest warrants were issued for Mr. Aydin and others allegedly involved in the Ciftlik Bank scandal. This included Kuti Kumar Yerdikal, a freelance software developer hired by Mehmet Aydin in 2017 to redesign Ciftlik Bank, making it more user-friendly and attractive to investors. Mr. Yerdikal claimed to have no knowledge of what Mr. Aydin was doing with investors' money. After 14 months in jail, Mr. Yerdikal was released. In a 2021 interview, he described Ciftlik Bank as being, quote, constantly in debt, absurd, and utopian. Also caught up in the investigation was Sia Soysal Aydin, the then wife of Mr. Mehmet Aydin. The two married in February 2017, with Sia filing for divorce in early 2018, shortly before the criminal investigation began. Investigators discovered that Mr. Aydin had been depositing investor money into a bank account under Sia's name. Sia is eventually cleared of all charges, later stating that the only crime she committed was marrying Mr. Aydin in the first place. So where was Mr. Aydin? Istanbul airport security footage, dated February 21st, 2018, shows Mr. Aydin moments before he boarded a flight, fleeing his home country of Turkey, and headed to the South American country of Uruguay, a place that Mr. Aydin was supposedly very fond of. The whole world about to find out exactly why. Shortly after the Ciftlik Bank scandal began to go public, a video emerged showing Mr. Aydin driving a Ferrari 458 luxury sports car in Uruguay. Mr. Aydin can be seen driving extremely recklessly, at one point almost drifting onto the curb before reversing and nearly hitting another vehicle. Mr. Aydin then took off at high speed. Along with the Ferrari 458 Spider, which currently sells for upwards 800,000 Turkish lira, 200,000 American dollars, Mr. Aydin also purchased a 5,400 square foot mansion. This luxurious mansion, purchased in 2017 by Mr. Aydin, is located in a wealthy private area in Marina de Lucia, Uruguay. Its amenities included a heated indoor pool, gambling area, indoor bar, outdoor bar, as well as a giant personal boat dock, big enough to hold Mr. Aydin's private yacht, which he spent approximately $12,000 per month to rent. Images from a year prior began to surface, showing Mr. Aydin and his ex-wife vacationing in Uruguay on what could only be assumed was Ciftlik Bank investors' money. According to Sia, though, her time with Mehmet Aydin wasn't all sunshine and roses. Mr. Aydin often overindulged in alcohol and at times became violent. According to Mr. Aydin's own personal bodyguard, Mr. Aydin had a habit for gambling, for women, as well as for a certain white substance. People were outraged and wanted Mr. Aydin brought to justice. In his absence, the Ciftlik Bank empire began to crumble. Ciftlik Bank delis began to close, with it being discovered that food sold at these franchises didn't even come from Ciftlik Bank farms, but were purchased elsewhere and simply shipped with the Ciftlik Bank label, fooling everyone. Ciftlik Bank's fleet of vans, 32 in total, were all seized by the Turkish government. Far from Mr. Aydin's promises, Ciftlik Bank farms held relatively few amounts of animals within them, with some reportedly being in quite poor health. The healthy ones were eventually sold, and all of Ciftlik Bank farms were officially closed. When angry investors appeared at one of Ciftlik Bank's recently closed farms, demanding sheep to help cover the cost of their investments, a Turkish police officer on site was reported to have said, "Look around you. Do you see any sheep here besides you?" To add further insult, Mr. Aydin released a video saying that he would not be turning himself in, and that he fully intended to repay back investors' money before disappearing entirely. It was rumored that he might have been living aboard his yacht for a time in an effort to avoid capture. In November 2018, 8 months after the Ciftlik Bank scandal went public, Mr. Aydin surfaced in Dubai. Seen partying and ordering large amounts of drinks in an expensive Dubai nightclub, Mr. Aydin and his female companion can be seen consuming a fiery beverage, while waitstaff gives them VIP treatment. The venue claimed Mr. Aydin spent thousands of dollars on drinks and tipped the staff thousands as well. By now, investigators realize that Mr. Aydin had transferred much of Ciftlik Bank investors' money into Bitcoin, allowing him to access it around the world. Shortly after being seen in Dubai, Mr. Aydin was spotted again, this time in Ukraine, the capital city, Kyiv. He was allegedly sighted by an investigative journalist at an entertainment complex, once again, thoroughly enjoying himself. Once he was recognized, Mr. Aydin quickly fled. Wanted posters soon began popping up around the city. Posted by the same investigative journalist who spotted Mr. Aydin days earlier, these wanted posters claimed that investors of Ciftlik Bank were offering the equivalent of 350,000 American dollars for information leading to the capture of Mr. Aydin. Less than 1 month later, in December of 2018, a video emerged allegedly showing Mr. Aydin dying after jumping out of a 27-story hotel window in an effort to escape authorities. This video turned out to be unrelated and was from 2 years prior in the United States. The man in the video was not Mehmet Aydin. However, authorities believed it was possible that the person who reposted the video online might have been none other than Mehmet Aydin himself. With an Interpol red notice out for his arrest, Mr. Aydin was an international fugitive, being hunted wherever he went. In early 2019, in a joint law enforcement effort between the countries of Turkey, Uruguay, and Brazil, Mr. Aydin was tracked down to the country of Brazil, where he was living apparently quite comfortably. With nowhere left to run, Mr. Aydin posted a video online agreeing to finally turn himself in. The very next day, Interpol agents arrived in Brazil, placing Mr. Aydin under arrest and preparing him for extradition back to Turkey. July 3rd, 2021, arriving at Istanbul International Airport, Mr. Aydin was finally home and on the way to answer for his crimes. His arrival was a media circus, with reporters from every major news agency following Mr. Aydin and the biggest fraud case in Turkish history right up to the door of the Istanbul Police Department. Mr. Aydin was interrogated for 4 days, being asked over 60 pages of questions. A preliminary court hearing was soon held, with Mr. Aydin facing charges including establishing an organization for the purpose of committing a crime, fraud of merchants or company managers, and fraud by using information systems, banks, or credit institutions as a tool. For Mr. Aydin's defense, he stated that he never established Ciftlik Bank for any fraudulent purposes. He also said that all investments have risks, and that he emphasized this to Ciftlik Bank investors. In closing, he demanded that seized Ciftlik Bank assets be used to repay those investors. Things are definitely not looking good for Mr. Aydin, with over 4,400 investors filing complaints against him, and the majority of Ciftlik Bank's confiscated assets no longer his to bargain with. Mr. Aydin was in a tight spot. But by far, the most unsettling part of the hearing came from a video presented by the prosecution showing the dark side of Mr. Aydin. The video shown was from 5 years prior, back in 2016, and Mr. Aydin was still rapping under the name Ego Man. According to evidence provided, Ego Man wasn't just rapping. He had created a website selling sports betting coupons. Essentially coupons that let you combine your bets for possibly larger payouts. One of the men who worked for him, referred to as Dosak in court documents, decided to leave Mr. Aydin's company and start a similar one on his own. Shortly after starting his own company, Dosak was forcibly brought to the basement of Mr. Aydin at his home in Bursa, northern Turkey, where Mr. Aydin, using his own cell phone camera to record, could be heard screaming at his former business partner, quote, "I will beat you here, then you can start talking. I hope that you forget the password and you'll get a clean beating from me here." The password he was referring to was the password to Dosak's new website, which Mr. Aydin forced him to shut down on the spot. Perhaps even more startling than seeing Ego Man's true colors was the revelation that he'd already been tried for this back in 2016, with a possible 7-year sentence being reduced to 7 months before being dropped entirely. Somehow, Mr. Aydin never served prison time. If not for this, Ciftlik Bank likely wouldn't have existed. Mr. Aydin next appeared in court on September 14th, 2021. Having already spent 2 months locked up, Mr. Aydin prepared a 4-page written statement claiming that he created a business, not a criminal organization, as the prosecution suggested, that he did not give any Ciftlik Bank employees any legal instruction, and he once again demanded that seized Ciftlik Bank assets be used to repay investors, 20 of who he had to face in court for the first time. The judge of the case, unmoved by Mr. Aydin's claims of innocence, concluded Mr. Aydin would remain in prison, awaiting further hearing while investigation into his cases continued. About a month and a half later, on November 2nd, 2021, the brother of Mehmet Aydin, Fatih Aydin, was extradited from Uruguay and brought home to face charges in the Ciftlik Bank trial. Having been in custody in Uruguay since July, around the same time as his brother's extradition, the two were about to be reunited at the trial. January 19th, 2022, the trial continued, and both Mehmet and Fatih Aydin had to face 34 angry investors this time, brought to testify. The court allowed for Mehmet Aydin to respond to investors' claims. Mehmet Aydin stated that the Ciftlik Bank investors' contract, which all investors agreed to, allowed for 90 days before having to pay out investors in the event that Ciftlik Bank ever shut down. Mr. Aydin claimed that many investors wouldn't wait the 90 days, instead filing complaints with their banks, who in turn refused to work with Ciftlik Bank. As for Mehmet Aydin's brother, Fatih Aydin, he stood accused of the same crimes as Mehmet. Fatih Aydin stated that he had no knowledge of any illegal activity happening at Ciftlik Bank. Fatih also stated that in order for Mehmet to start the company, he co-signed on the Ciftlik Bank business contract, since it required 2 signatures for approval. He said he did this only as a formality to help his brother. Fatih claimed that he did not work for Ciftlik Bank, nor did he receive any monetary gain from it. His statements were all confirmed by his brother. After hearing all this and more, the judge of the case decided that the Aydin brothers would remain in prison until their next appearance in court 2 months later. March 1st, 2022. The Aydin brothers were back in court, and this time they had to answer to the Turkish Banking Regulation and Supervision Agency, who accused Ciftlik Bank of violating Turkish bank law by using the word bank in their name. Fatih Aydin responded by saying that the word bank in Ciftlik Bank had nothing to do with banking or finance, and that its name was not intended to imply anything of the sort. For Mehmet Aydin's part, he stated that he had applied for the name Ciftlik Bank with the Turkish Patent Institute, and no objections were raised at the time. He went on to say that those who allowed him to use the name in the first place should be the ones investigated, not him. Perhaps the most interesting, even comical statement from Mr. Aydin was that in the Turkish language, bank can also mean park bench. In regards to him using that word in his company name, he said, quote, "Perhaps that is what I meant." The judge of the case wasn't very amused and decided that both brothers continue to be held awaiting further trial. November 2022. 5 men were arrested in Turkey as part of an investigation into an illegal online betting organization. The alleged ringleader was a man named Errol Aydin, the brother-in-law of Mehmet Aydin. Surveillance cameras showed Errol and other members of his gang withdrawing illegal betting money from ATM machines. The gang were quickly tried and sentenced to prison. For Mehmet Aydin, further ties to illegal gambling definitely wasn't a good look, and things were about to get even worse. April 8th, 2023. The last man still wanted in connection to the Ciftlik Bank scandal was arrested and extradited to Turkey to face trial. This man was Osman Naim Kaya, the alleged right-hand man of Mehmet Aydin. Mr. Kaya was taken into custody by Interpol agents in Uruguay, where he had spent the previous 2.5 years under house arrest for cases involving fraud. Back in 2017, Mr. Kaya became Mr. Aydin's personal consultant. He allowed for Mr. Aydin to use his name while signing for the ownership of multiple properties, including his mansion in Uruguay, as well as for the signing of the rental agreement of his private yacht. Mr. Kaya claimed his innocence, and he had no knowledge of any illegal activity at Ciftlik Bank. Unfortunately for Mr. Kaya, the court wasn't hearing any of it, and he was quickly sentenced to prison, once again due to charges of fraud. April 14th, 2023. The people of Turkey received news they've been waiting nearly 5 years to hear. In the most recent, and perhaps most important trial to date, the court decided that the Aydin brothers were guilty of violating Turkish bank law by using the word bank in the Ciftlik Bank name. Both brothers received the first of likely multiple sentences, that being 2.5 years in prison. This decision supposedly outraged Mehmet, who continues to maintain his innocence from behind bars. After all the fame, fortune, and false promises, it seems as if justice is finally being served. With multiple cases still ongoing, investors still waiting to be repaid, and the legal or illegal status of Ciftlik Bank yet to be determined, only one thing's for certain: we haven't heard the last of Mehmet Aydin.